started this morning. Hopefully everybody has taken advantage of the breakfast over there. We're a few minutes behind, but we've got time built in. We'll still get through everything we want to cover, and still hopefully after our keynote speaker we'll have a chance for Q&As before we move to our breakdown. Welcome this morning to the We Grow Talent Summit put on by Rutherford Works. My name is Greg Jones. I'm the Senior Vice President of Education and Workforce Development of Rutherford Works, which is part of the Rutherford County Chamber of Commerce. Before I go any further at all, I want to stop just a second and thank our TCAT and Nissan here for allowing us to have this event today in this beautiful facility. If you haven't been in here before, it's kind of got a wow factor to it, so thank you, Dr. Jeff Sis. In the breakout sessions a little bit later, you're going to get a chance to hear from TCAT and the great programs that they offer here, as well as their partnering abilities with local companies and the ways you can partner for training with them. Also, I'd like to introduce my team. I'm not sure if they're buzzing around here. I'm not sure if they're in here, but Caitlin Sawyer is our Talent Development Director. She's here this morning. You probably have met her at our registration desk. And then also we have Essence Briscoe, which is our Marketing Director. Once again, I think she's buzzing around trying to take care of everything. These two are the ones that keep me out and make me look good. So, Rutherford Works, I want to spend just a few minutes talking about Rutherford Works and what we do in the Chamber. I'm not going to go into detail. These slides and this information will be in an email that comes to you after the event. But I do want to cover just a few things that we do. We're always looking for solutions for businesses in the area. And those solutions, the way we come up with those is we have council meetings. Periodically, we meet with local employers and local companies around these 5 sectors of construction, healthcare, advanced manufacturing, supply chain, and so on, to understand the challenges that the employers are having, and then also we invite education to the room. So as the employers are hearing these challenges, we're working on concepts and ways to inject skill training into our education systems to get good alignment with students that are coming out of our system so they can go directly into our workforce at our local employers. We're also constantly looking for partnership opportunities, anything that our local businesses or companies need help with. We try to be that connector. We try to go out and say, well, if this is what you're needing, I'm aware of this guy over here or this gal or this company that provides that service. For our companies. A couple of stats down at the bottom of this I just want to point out, and I want to point out the importance. We have 3 colleges that we work with, and most everything tonight or today we're talking about is Rutherford County centric. 3 major colleges. First one is TCAT right here that we work with. We work with Motlow just down the road, and we work with Middle Tennessee State University. And you're going to get a chance to hear from all of those organizations in the breakout sessions today. One other very, very important number is our school systems here in Rutherford County. The combination of Murfreesboro City Schools and Rutherford County Schools, I have 55,000 students listed there, but I think they've locked in on their enrollment for this year, and actually that number is approaching 60,000 students. 60,000 actually is a little bit bigger than the city of Smyrna, to put it in some kind of perspective. I think the population of Smyrna is somewhere around 58,000. So we, as companies, employers, Rutherford Works, if we're not helping you connect with those 60,000 students, which is our future workforce, we're missing out on opportunity. So that's one of the reasons it makes it so important for what we do with Rutherford Works. Just a few more things we work on, not only business opportunities, but we look for student opportunities as well. And we have a great partnership with our Rutherford County School Systems and Tyra Pilgrim. Tiffany Phillips is in the room. You're going to hear from her in a breakout session later today and learn how you can connect with the Rutherford County school system, as I was mentioning just a minute ago, to start building the careers of some of those students and then hopefully go to work. A few things we do: 8th grade Pathways Fair. We try to help our 8th graders understand careers that are out there. All 8th graders in the county take a youth science assessment that tells them what they're good at, what their aptitudes. We try to help them align their careers or their interests before they go into high school, so then as they pick their pathways in high school, they're not wasting time on going down the wrong path. They know going into it. One other thing on the slide I'll cover is our teacher externship. Some of you in the room partner with us on that. We get 40 of our educators out of the systems here in Rutherford County, and for a week, we send them to multiple companies during that week so they can go in and learn about what the company does, what great careers there are in that company, what you can make, and then the educators carry all of that back to their classroom, and that way they can tell their students, and not just this year, but year over year, they can tell their students, hey, did you know Turner Construction has excellent career opportunities and they pay this? Try to build some of that excitement back in high school. But we're all here today. That's enough of Rutherford Works. And you can go to our website and look at that. On social media, you can do a search for Rutherford Works and like or follow us to learn a lot more. We're here to talk about recruiting and retention today. I know it's quite the challenge for all of you. You read in the papers, I got a few headlines here that I kind of want to walk through. But if you look back over the last 3 years, it has been unprecedented what you guys have gone through. And looking at the audience today and looking at those of you that registered, probably 40 to 50% of you are HR, talent acquisition, recruiting, development related. I know what you've been through over the last 3 years with the pandemic and all the elements that fit into that. And not just the pandemic, but the supply chain issues as you're trying to decide, can I run my plant today, can I not? What do I do with my people? You know, if we can't run the plant, do we pay them, do we not pay them? It's been very tough. I went back, these headlines you see here, and I kind of want to transition through them. This just represents the last 3 months of just a few headlines that are out there. If you start at the top, and going back to September, U.S. job openings rose in September. It's still a tight labor market. Fast forward 1 month, October. U.S. added 261,000 jobs in October, signaling economic resilience. You come down a little bit, it kind of highlights what you guys had to do during this tight market over the last year to year and a half, and what you're continuing to have to do, and that's, fighting worker shortage. Wake, Raleigh, North Carolina offer bonuses, other perks, sign-on bonuses. I know many of you guys have had to do that. Move across to over on the right there. Employers rethink the need for college degrees in the tight labor market. A lot of you have had to drop your criteria some just to get people in the door into your jobs. As we progress down through, though, keep in mind this is 3 months. We're starting to see a slight transition right down here from the great resignation to the great uncertainty. The big quit may be losing steam, and I hope you're starting to feel that in your organizations, that people aren't job jumping as much as they have with the great resignation. Over to the right, the U.S. labor market is less tight than it appears. And then the next headline, the companies cutting jobs, freezing hiring, here's the list. You can see in the small print there, they list Amazon and Meta, and a lot of the tech companies are laying off at this point. There's a few other segments that are laying off, or at least freezing salary hiring at this point. But you can kind of see the transitioning. The last 2 headlines here, I think, are probably the most important today that we need to think about moving forward. Employee retention replaces talent acquisition as the top HR priority for next year. And then the new bar to raise engagement and lower attrition. So the better you can be today with your employees, the more likely you are to be able to keep them and keep them from always looking for that grass and greener on the other side. And I know if you read a lot of the articles, it said, I think that the stat was about 46% that said 46% of the people that left their job in the Great Resignation wish they hadn't. They want to come back. So employee engagement is definitely key. And our keynote speaker is going to touch on some of that in a few minutes. I've got 2 slides of data here that I want to cover with you. Why? Number one, I love data. I love to see data. I love to use data in my decision making. But the other reasons is, you guys, when you signed up for this event today, we asked you a few questions, and I felt like we needed to compile that data and give it back to you today so you can kind of see what everybody here said. But then the third reason that the data is important is, I know we've got a lot of HR people in the room. As you're moving forward and you're working on strategies for engagement for your workforce, and you're going to your CEOs and you're going to your leadership and asking them, I need $2 million because I need to give a $2 raise for all of our workforce across all of our plants. You need to have data to back it up. That's the first thing your CEO is going to say is, well, why do you feel like we need to do that? So you've got to have that data to sell your strategy and move forward. So looking at the data, if you look over to the right-hand side, I have listed as other. There was 3 categories there. And I was trying to bucket this into either recruiting or retention. The three on the far right really could fall into either one of those buckets, so I'm really calling those other. But if you back up and look at the rest of it, nearly 66% of you in here today said that recruiting is still your greatest workforce challenge. And then about 20% of you said retention is your greatest workforce challenge. Honestly, I looked at some data through the last year, and retention was at a higher level. This is actually a little bit lower than I've seen in some other data points. Is it because the market's shifting? Is it because the Great Resignation is not the Great Resignation anymore? I don't know. But it's just data that we need to be thinking about as we move forward. One more data set. We had asked you in your in the event registration question about rate your hiring needs as it pertains to entry level, to skill level, and to management. 3 quick charts there, and I'll start with entry level. 52.6% of you told us that I still have a great need for entry level positions to bring them into my company. Skill level, 43.1% of you told us I still have that great need or that high need to get skill level people into my organization. And then the management level, about 13% of you told us you still have a high need. It's much lower. You know, if you think about it, most companies do or attempt to do their promotions from within. So I can see where many companies are not trying to go out and recruit for their supervisor, manager, higher manager levels. I have one last slide here for you before turning over to our keynote speaker. And really, this slide is the basis of why we're here today and what we're doing today. Back earlier this year, I knew all of you were struggling with recruiting issues, and I wanted to try to help. What can Rutherford Works do to help? So I went out from a Rutherford Works standpoint and said, what are the potential people out there that can be hired in Rutherford County? You know, I want to highlight them, get them on a graph, and then show them to you. I've been showing this slide to our workforce councils. I see some of our council members in here. Actually, they're probably tired of seeing this slide because I show it everywhere I go. But I think it's an important slide to understand, hey, who can I be hiring right here in this area? If you start in my bracketed area, starting with graduating at MTSU, you know, how many people knew 4,000, nearly 4,700 people are graduating from MTSU a year? But you know what? In one of our breakout sessions, we have MTSU here to talk to you about how do I connect with those 4,700. And all the way down the list, Fort Campbell soldiers transitioning. That's the only thing up here that is not in Rutherford County, but they're just an hour and a half up the road. Did you realize they had 4,500 soldiers transitioning a year? So one of the things we want to do from a Rutherford County, Rutherford Works standpoint is go up and how can we recruit those transitioning soldiers and their spouse into Rutherford County, and then you guys can recruit them into your jobs in your company. What a great work. We have Mr. Corey Wingfield that's going to be in one of the breakout sessions to tell you how to connect to Fort Campbell. And all the way down the list, we have representatives for each one of these categories or these potential pockets for hire. Without further ado, let's move on to our keynote speaker today. Our keynote speaker is Mr. Chris Nichols. I don't know if you met Chris or not before. He's a very dynamic person, but let me read you his bio before I have him come up. Chris Nichols is the Vice President of Strategy and Integration for Job.com. In this role, Chris is responsible for aligning current and future acquisition in the Job.com portfolio and propel growth across markets. Prior to joining Job.com, Chris served as a Vice President at Endeavus, where he was responsible for refining and unifying strategies in business development, marketing, and recruitment options. Additionally, he hosts and produces the Talent Tide podcast, powered by Endeavus, where he discusses the most challenging topics in talent and HR tech with their industry leaders in those areas. He resides in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, with his wife, Haley, and his 3 beautiful daughters. I want to welcome Mr. Chris Nichols.
All right. That bio is about 2 months old, so I now have 4 children. We have added a son, So it's been a wild 60 days for me, and I'm excited to be here. Rutherford County, I moved here in 2016, but I have been fully invested in the community since we relocated here from Louisiana by way of Illinois, like many other transplants. But it's a great community. There's so many great things happening, lots of opportunity for growth. With growth comes the troubles and the problems that we have in HR and talent acquisition today. And so I'm going to give an overview today. We have a partner at job.com called Labor IQ. They are a team of labor economists. They're based out of Dallas, Texas. We work with them on a monthly basis to get a better understanding of not just what the BLS data tells us, which should be getting released, I would assume. I don't know if it came out yesterday or if it's going to come out today, but we'll be getting another round of labor data coming from them. But Labor IQ has proprietary technology that allows for them to make some projections and tell us a different story, aside from just the information that we get from the government each month. They're also pulling information from places like LinkedIn, which I actually have some data every month that LinkedIn produces that I didn't get in the presentation because they produced it last night. I was really holding out, trying to make sure to get it in. I'm going to read that information off to you, but it's a really interesting time that we're in right now in relation to making sure that we have the right talent, the right seats. To be honest, I could walk up here right now and say, welcome to 2019 labor market predictions, because I think that we're going to be much closer to what it looked like then, which, to be honest, sucks too. It was 3.6 unemployment, and we're not that far away from it now. Much of the things that you're going to hear me talk about in data points sounds like hiring is down. But the reality is we've spent the last 2+ years overhiring. And so dealing with both the Great Resignation and returning from the pandemic, every company was hiring more than they really should have probably been hiring. So these numbers are just returning to where we were pre-pandemic. So I hate to burst your bubble, but your job is not really going to get any easier. This is all going to be important for you to take back to your CPOs, your CHROs, because they're going to be reading these articles that Greg put up here, and they're going to assume that you don't need any money this year, that it's going to be easier for you. You're going to have to be able to have difficult conversations with them about what hiring will look like, what retaining your team will look like. And so we're going to talk through how inflation is impacting the workforce as well. That's going to be a major driver of retaining employees. The price for talent is continuing to go up, and will continue to. So we have all of these economic challenges facing us within talent acquisition and HR that are going to continue to make our lives a little bit miserable. So because I didn't get things put in, as I was mentioning, with relation to hiring, so that LinkedIn data that came through yesterday, month over month, we're down 4.9% from October hiring. Year over year, down 20.5%. And actually, Nashville, seasonally adjusted from April through November, is actually above the national average with relation to hiring percentages being down, which I know sounds weird. The national average is at 20.5%. Nashville market is actually down 21.6%. So that's kind of weird for us because we spent the last decade in this market being at the top of every list for hiring, so it is unusual to see us there. But markets like Nashville, where we had a ton of people moving here, also was one of the first markets to kind of return from the pandemic. We saw that just due to government legislation, so red states tended to be states that returned to work more quickly. And so other places like St. Louis and Atlanta are actually, their hiring is not down as much, but they also didn't return to work quite as fast. So their return from the pandemic has been has subsided in comparison to places like Austin, which I was at this week. Very similar market to Nashville, a bit more tech hiring, so they're actually having a more challenging time themselves than we are. Fortunately for us, we do have a manufacturing and supply chain base here, as well as our healthcare industry in Middle Tennessee that are all continuing to grow and help to kind of hold hiring where it needs to be. And then only 3 industries actually gained in hiring in the month of November. Government, primarily because we ended an election and people can start making decisions again. supply chain, surprisingly, and education. Those supply chain numbers, I would imagine, if they were seasonally adjusted in this particular report, are probably actually either flat or down. We just happen to be headed into the holiday season. So that's why I believe those numbers are where they are. But I wanted to share those with you just to kind of set the stage for today, because honestly, the information that we're going to go through down. Okay. Up is down and down is up. So we really have two different labor markets that we're looking at. And Greg kind of showed that with the newspaper articles that he showed on that slide that he had. You're going to see all of the gloom and doom around the tech layoffs, because those are B2C brands. People know, we all get on Facebook every day. We're using those platforms. We're using platforms like Netflix and Amazon. And so we know them, and media companies, they get paid for getting clicks. And so when they write about these companies, we give them more and more advertising dollars. So they're going to continue to write articles about Facebook laying off less than 1% of their workforce because it gives them revenue. So we have to keep that in mind as well and make sure that when we're taking in this information, that we're being smart as business leaders ourselves and actually taking the data and making an accurate assessment of what it's actually telling us. We have to be informed because, I'll be honest, your CEOs, your CFOs, your COOs, they're not as informed as you think that they are. I've sold to them, I talk to them on a regular basis. They see those articles and then they start making assumptions. And so that's why it's so important for us to be data-centric when we, as operations and HR leaders, when we start having conversations with them about setting up budgets and understanding where we're going to go. Other industries that were impacted quite significantly or are being impacted right now are industries that we saw as a major boom in the pandemic. So real estate, construction, when we had supply chain issues, we had a huge insertion of workforce there because nobody could get packages on time. So these are other industries that also overhired in late 2020 and 2021, which is why you're seeing layoffs now. They realize that they have, if you were to look at a graph, down, up, now they're here, they leveled off. So this is probably the number that they would have been at had we not had a pandemic. It would have had steady growth to here. But unfortunately, the way that it looks today is major surge, huge layoffs, and now we're balancing out. So unfortunately for us, we don't have a huge subset of finance jobs in Nashville. Obviously, we had Alliance Bernstein move here 4 or 5 years ago, but we're not a major financial market like a Dallas or a New York or Chicago is. Real estate and construction, those you're seeing a slight decline just because of where interest rates are today. But Nashville also is, I'm not going to say recession-proof in that way, but people are still moving here all the time. It's still a market that people want to be in, which is helpful for all of us as well when we look to continue to hire and retain talent. However, the cost to live here is going up much more quickly than our wages are. And so the people that are moving here are really having a hard time finding jobs that will help them pay these mortgages with now 4, 5, 6, 7%. So keep that in mind. We're also going to talk about salaries today as well. But I think that you'll also see, we're talking to a lot of companies and clients right now. They're looking at ways that they could prepare themselves for an economic downturn. They're looking at ways to cut back. And so my personal advice to all of you is to make sure that as human resource leaders, as operations leaders in those conversations, that we're remembering to be human and be authentic, and make sure that we don't have situations. I don't know how many of you heard the story last week about the furniture company right before Thanksgiving that no Warnack, no Cobra, they just laid everybody off, 1,200 employees, I think, the night before Thanksgiving. Let's try to make sure that those of us that are in this room, which I assume that you all are thinking about the people on the other side of the table. Obviously, we may not always have a seat at that table, but let's try to make sure that we're continuing to bring those types of stories to our CEOs, to our CFOs, so that way when we're reading these other articles, you can be like, hey, let's not be this company, Okay? Let's try to avoid that in the future. So as I was saying, a recession is maybe coming, maybe not. It depends on how you look at it. If you look at economic factors, maybe we're already there. But if you look at hiring, it's still an area where we're not quite looking at that as a severe potential. So the reality is things are changing. And as I mentioned, if you look at where we are in comparison to, say, 2019, we could say that we're just returning to a normalization here. That's why I believe that any recession that we have, especially related to talent, which is unusual, because in previous economic downturns, hiring subsides quite substantially. But what we're going to look at here is a softer landing. We're going to see less companies, less people laid off, in my opinion, and from the folks at Labor IQ and their labor economists are telling us the same thing. So that's a positive. However, we also have to keep in mind that it's a competitive workforce, and that normalization, and even though we're hiring fewer people, does not mean that it's going to get easier to hire. The reality is, year over year, wages are at 4.7%. 4.7 doesn't sound like much, but when you start tying it to your own wages, so a $15 an hour employee, that's now $15.70. If you went to $15.50, there's a chance that you're still 20 cents below market average, and you're probably losing out on talent. So that slide that Greg put up that says that we have a lack of qualified candidates, a lack of candidates, there's a good chance it has to do with pay, because inflation is rising even faster than our wages are. So we have all of these competing influences that are going to continue to compress the talent market for us. On that 15, if you jump to 22, so those skilled trades type jobs, you're looking at an entire $1 an hour jump year over year, 22 to 23 at 4.7%. So those are the types of data points to be taking back to your CFO and your CHRO as they plan. And they're probably already deep into that. So you might also need to start preparing to have a conversation with your marketing department about how you're going to spin those conversations to candidates. So, as I was saying, with relation to the relationship between companies and employees has changed dramatically over the last 3 years. Pre-pandemic, we were seeing some remote work, very little hybrid type environments. It was a small percentage of companies were allowing people to work from home. Personally, I've worked from home since 2018, but we were seeing that. The pandemic obviously escalated those types of things. Nashville's not a place where we see as much of it, just because we do have such a high number of manufacturing and supply chain related jobs, but it is a real thing. There's a lot of conversations out there. As I was mentioning, media companies get paid for clicks. If you go to LinkedIn, almost every day there's a conversation about remote work, return to work. Elon Musk is in the news right now, right? He's trying to bring everybody back into an office on a fairly regular basis. So we're seeing all these things. CEOs are seeing this. CFOs are seeing the cost savings potentially. There's data out there that says people that work from home are about 15 to 20% less efficient than those that work in an office. However, LinkedIn has data that shows that their remote work jobs have a 100% increase in applications over jobs that are in an office. So most candidates are willing to take less money for the opportunity to work from home and control their own life. So that's a major change that we've seen in the last 3 years is with relation to leverage. So I know that I'm talking about pay, but now we have this entire subset of people that are willing to work for less if they can control where they work from. So these are, when I said at the beginning that it's not going to get easier for us, we actually have more problems today that we have to solve. And my recommendation, because everyone comes to me and they say, what do you think about the 4-day work week? What do you think about work from home? And my thoughts on that are, what does it mean to your company? You have to culturally understand what your company is capable of managing and not be looking at outside influences to understand how that works. Because no one knows how your business works better than the leaders inside. I will say that if you're not choosing to take some of these routes, it is going to be hard to hire the kind of talent that you potentially need. So you're going to have to understand that you might have to spend more in talent attraction. than maybe a competitor who is more of a work from home or remote or hybrid environment. And the hybrid piece is something that I think that we'll see a lot more in the Nashville market. I think that Tennessee remains a conservative area. I think that you'll see more companies push for them to be back in offices. But I think that the push will be relatively to a more hybrid type style. And you'll see that across the country as well. Which also means that the talent that you have in your offices are still liable to be poached from companies that are in Texas, in Florida, in North Carolina, our main competitors for when we're trying to bring companies to our bring building. But the employers taking back that control, it's there. CEOs are seeing the articles about it, but the reality is it's not going to be as clean cut as the articles make it out to be when you jump on CNBC. That one already. So when we think about the available talent pool, so this is actually an interesting conversation piece that we had with Labor IQ last week in our weekly call with them, our monthly call. So while we're seeing hiring slow, we're seeing the pressure to hire talent remain very high. You all mentioned that you're not hiring candidates as quickly as possible. You also mentioned that skilled trades and entry-level workers were the hardest to find. And we have a real problem in the United States right now with finding people that are willing to work entry-level jobs. And one of the reasons for that is our immigration policy it's kind of a mess because it's become so politicized. But throughout the United States history, we have always had a healthy influx of immigrants that have allowed us to help fill high volume, low skilled, hourly type roles. And in the past 3 administrations, I guess, there's so much debate about what that should or could be that, and with the declining birth rates in the country, we have fewer people that are willing to do the jobs that we have historically had to do the work that most Americans have grown up thinking of as being less than the job that they would like to have when they grow up to be adults. Myself, as a millennial, I was told, and most of my peers all believe, that if we didn't go to college and get a bachelor's degree, that we were basically going to be a failure in life. And so you have an entire generation of people that are now making up the majority of the workforce that did not want to do any of those types of jobs. And so we have a gap there, and now we have another generation that's entering the workforce that sees an opportunity to be their own boss. Gen Alpha, or whatever we're calling it at this point, I don't even know which one it is, but the TikTok generation, they are content creators. They're looking for ways to create income for themselves and not actually even have to go work for anyone else. And you're seeing that even in small communities, because I can live in a town like I grew up in of 300 people and have access to the entire world. And that wasn't the case even 15 years ago. And so the market is so different, and it has changed so rapidly that that's one of the reasons that we're having so many challenges finding the talent that we have. I also think that many of you mentioned qualified. That's such a qualified candidates to me is something that we use as an excuse for mismanagement or poor management in a lot of ways, in my opinion. Because what does it mean to be qualified in most organizations? I think that most companies don't have great onboarding programs. They don't have great training and development programs that allow them to be able to bring anyone into their business and teach them the hard skills that they need to be able to work. Obviously, soft skill development is highly important, but hard skills should be something that most organizations can teach. The reality is your pay is probably a mess, your schedules are probably a mess, and those are the things that are keeping you from finding the candidates that you actually want to. So keep that in mind as you go into next year as well. So as Greg even mentioned earlier, when we think about 2023, companies paying below market is going to continue to be a major hurdle. And I see it all the time, especially in Middle Tennessee, that so many companies think that they're paying what are market wages, and they're really 25% sometimes lower than they should be. without being able to extrapolate that data, I really recommend that you find good labor data, you bring people in to talk to your finance team, but you've got to find a way to offset. And there's other ways to offset being below market. Like I mentioned, flexible scheduling. Look, if you're going to be below market and then force people to come in on hours that are not convenient to them, and you're also going to treat them poorly, nobody's going to want to work there. You could actually pay above market, and those types of factors since the pandemic are going to be leading indicators of why you're not retaining your talent. We have to focus on the people aspect. As I mentioned earlier, being human goes a long way when we're hiring talent. And making sure that your managers understand what it means to actually be a manager, and we're not just promoting those from within that are our best employees. Because being the best employee does not make you the best leader. We see it in sports all the time. Big name athlete ends up becoming a coach, and they flop miserably. And it's because they never had to teach someone else how to do their job. They might have just been more naturally talented than the rest. And so our leadership development programs need improving. We have to continue to work on the human side of our business. One of the reasons that we're seeing less hiring is because voluntary quits are going down, which is a direct reflection of the Great Resignation, which I could not be more tired of hearing as a phrase. But the reality is there's less volatility in the market right now. People, if you think about like Maslow's basic hierarchy of needs, most people want to feel safe and secure. And we all are seeing the news about potential recession. And so most employees are now looking at their job and saying, I think I'd like this. I have safety here. I feel comfortable here. So we're seeing less people being willing to just jump ship and move to the next one. And some of that also occurs because, as Greg mentioned, a lot of people regret the moves that they've made. You're seeing a great opportunity, I think, for most companies to look at boomerang employees. I've been around plenty of leaders who have a perspective that once somebody leaves, they are essentially dead to them. And I think that is the absolute wrong mentality to take at any point, because a boomerang employee offers so much value in that they already know who you are, less time to onboard and get them up to speed, even at the hourly level. Not even talking salary, but they're going to understand the processes and procedures. And you know what? They went someplace else and saw that the grass was not green on the other side and want to return, and they're probably going to be a better employee for you the second time around than they were the first time. And so try to make sure that we're not burning bridges for those employees that did quit. Make sure that if we do lay off, especially in a community like Rutherford County, that layoffs are likely to come back around at some point whenever you need to hire in a year or two. So how we treat people during those layoffs as well will impact our ability when we're growing again to hire. But as Greg mentioned, talent retention is going to be a huge focus for companies. And so being human, being authentic, these are things that I repeat over and over again because we get lost in numbers. Companies get lost in systems, financials, and so we start treating everybody as if they are a balance sheet equation. And so we have to make sure that we remain human. And as frontline leaders in HR, that's our responsibility. We are the stakeholder for the employees. So make sure we're keeping that in mind as we move into what appears to be a different economic situation. This slide is a bit of good news. So I've talked about pay and the challenges there, but we will see less irrational pay. I think that you'll be able to limit the number of sign-on bonuses that you were potentially paying in the past, especially if you can find ways to increase wages and start treating people as the humans that they are. Obviously, during the Great Resignation, we were throwing as much spaghetti at the wall with different varieties to see if we could make any of it stick. And so, whether it was sign-on bonuses or flexible work, I think now is the time to stabilize and ask yourself, who are we going to be going forward? What is our business model going to be? We're evaluating that at job.com. Job.com is a technology company. that has acquired over $150 million in revenue from small to medium-sized staffing companies. Primarily in the past, they were all working in office in a branch-style locations. One of the companies that we acquired was a completely remote workforce. And so Job.com, having acquired all of these different cultures and systems ourselves, is now evaluating who we want to be going forward. And so it's allowing us to say, are we hybrid? Are we 100% work from home? How do we train and develop individuals that are going to be completely remote? So it's a great time to, if hiring is slowing, for you to be able to ask these questions, start planning and strategizing for how you move forward. If you're hiring like software engineers and developers, it should be a lot easier next year thanks to some of those layoffs that we're seeing in technology as well. As I mentioned earlier, still in the top labor market. Look, there's great data points out there. I mentioned our partner, Labor IQ. There's also other companies like MC that exist. I encourage you to talk to your peers here today and find out where they're getting data and information, statistics from. Greg and the Chamber are a great resource as well to be able to provide really pertinent statistical information about what's happening in the market. The reality is looking at what's happening in Chattanooga and all that relevant to what's happening right here. And so having that information about what's occurring in Murfreesboro, what's occurring in Smyrna, and Laverne, and how that affects us locally in comparison to, say, national, is far more important than looking at the state as a whole. Keep that in mind as well as you're looking to make decisions. And finally, the biggest takeaway that I hope you all have from the couple of hours that we'll spend here this morning is that the talent market is going to continue to change. It's not just going to change today, tomorrow, or next year, but it's rapidly evolving. The pandemic escalated some changes to the market, but in some ways it has slowed down other aspects. If you look at learning, as I've mentioned, learning and development. There has been really no evolution of learning and development since the pandemic started. There's been such a breakneck speed to try to figure out how we have butts in seats that we have no idea how we're going to continue to retain that talent, develop them, and put them in leadership positions over the next few years. The biggest thing that we can all do, and I've mentioned this over and over again, is provide our teams with the support that they need, make sure that they feel that they have the information, whether it's about the market, whether it's about the jobs that they're even selling. And what I mean by that is your operations managers, your line leaders, etc. Make sure that when they're interviewing candidates, they know what the job is. They know what the experience is like of being in that person's shoes. Because the reality is, you can't be human if you don't know who the person that's going to be standing next to you is. So keep that in mind. Make sure that your employers are thinking about the people that you're employing, because they are our neighbors. We live next to these people, and we have to keep putting people first. So that's all I have today. I'm looking forward to you all having a great day. I'm happy to do Q&A and answer any questions before you all move on to your individual session.
Do we have any questions for Chris while he's here? We've got about 10 minutes to take a few questions. Yes, Stephanie.
Can you speak to anything you've seen around companies shifting to automation with an eye toward the demographic shifts, not necessarily reducing jobs, but upskilling individuals in other jobs?
Yeah, for sure. So what you often see in that category, and I've seen it at Job.com as my company was acquired by Job.com. So we were acquired by a technology company that is really trying to evolve what is an industry of staffing and recruiting that is, any of you have been a recruiter, it's pretty much been the same job that it has been for the last 25, 30 years. There's been some technological advances like applicant tracking systems and more features, but the reality is it's kind of the same smile and dial type approach. And so anytime that if you're using automation, whether it's manufacturing or anything else, the reality is that Most companies invest a lot in the technology, in the development of the technology, and very little in how they're going to manage the people that are interacting with the technology. And so that has to be a major part of whenever you bring technology in, how is it going to affect the jobs and the roles, and how is it going to change work? Because you're going to have people, no matter what, especially on the management side, are used to seeing things done the way that it's always been done. And so making sure that those might be the people that you're moving out of the organization, right? People that are unwilling to change, and managing change will be the most challenging part of any technological innovation.
Other questions?
Anything else? The good companies will. The companies that are going to be the best at employing their people will be the ones that are best at teaching the hard skills. Because the reality is, soft skills are something that you obtain over time. Hard skills are ever changing. So the mention of like adding automation, those are hard skills. Companies that are not good at bringing that automation into a business are going to struggle with retaining talent. And so I guess the short answer to that is yes. And that even accounts for like industries like healthcare, where you wouldn't think of it being, the impact of hard skills there are they learn hard skills in college, right? If I'm going to school to be a nurse, I'm learning the majority of the hard skills that we think that we need. But the reality is that you have to look at what is the job? As I mentioned in the previous question, what are the jobs that we're going to have, and how does it impact our customers? So in healthcare, they might learn their hard skills in college, but the soft skills that they're going to have in the workplace are going to be far more important to patient satisfaction. So it all comes back down to what is your company going to do? What do they care about? So it depends on the industry, depends on the company, and the culture, in my opinion, about how you manage whether it's hard skills or soft development. But I do think that companies that understand what it is that they want people to be when they get there, those are going to be the companies that are the most successful. Any other questions? Yeah. Sure. So another place that we get a lot of great data from is McKinsey. McKinsey has a future of work. McKinsey is a consulting firm. Future of work is a division of their business. And so we get a lot of great data and information about what's happening from them. So the LinkedIn piece, most people don't see it in the notification, or most of you probably aren't getting on there as often as maybe I do. But at the end of every month, they have a workforce confidence index. And they look at the top 25 markets in the country, and they pull those out. Nashville happens to be one of those markets, but they also look at the entire country as well. And they create an aggregate data source. As I mentioned, some other companies that you can look at. NeighborIQ, which is our partner. MC is another company that you could look at. And BLS data is, in my opinion, is very reactive information. So finding McKinsey's and those types of companies that are providing an assessment on where we're going rather than just where we've been is very important. Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Chris, first of all, you have a great hairstyle.
Thank you, you too. Great beard.
We all get caught up in the here and now in our talent needs. I like to also try and think longer term strategy, thinking in retention, talent, recruitment. Do y'all do some data metrics and analytics and studies relative to in the next 8 years, every baby boomer that ever lived is going to be over 65. You talk about Generation Alpha, who's not yet in the workforce, but we're at Z. And there's less of those, we just have more workforce people leaving than we have coming in, birth rates. What's your longer term, if you can speak to it at all, I don't know what kind of.
So I have a couple of points on that, because there's actually some interesting data right now that shows that boomers aren't leaving at the workforce at the rate that they should, for a couple of reasons. Pay, the outlier pay that I mentioned, I think 2 slides ago. So pay over the last couple of years has ramped up significantly, and boomers also realize that they really like the millennial idea of working from home. And so we're seeing a lot of boomers continue to remain in the workforce a little bit longer than their parents might have. And so that's actually creating a bit of a leadership and culture bubble within a lot of organizations. So millennials and even Gen Xers are not rising into leadership positions as rapidly as they once might have, or as boomers might have. Freaking boomers, man, they have just been holding us all back forever now. Let's get out. But the reality is you're right, and that's where conversations about automation and technology and how we're going to become a smarter workforce are really important. And it's interesting because we think about America and the banking industry as a major industry, right? Which is about as conservative as they come. But we're going to see major shifts in certain industries to becoming a more technologically advanced business, which are going to mean less of a need for bank tellers. I think you already see that. You can walk into a bank that might have been built 20 years ago, and there's one teller there, whereas there's like eight stations for them. And so these things are going to be what changes. And so I talk a lot about what companies are going to be ahead of the curve. And the innovation that occurs, we so often think about the hardness of our business. So what is our business today, and how does it affect our customers? But the reality is a great business plan starts looking 5 and 10 years in advance of where we're going. So I'm thankful to be at a company that knows that their goal is to use blockchain data to secure candidate information securely to understand how we can better predict hiring. That's our 10-year goal, but we are at least 5 years from being anywhere near being able to touch that. So we know that in the short term, we're trying to accumulate as much data as possible. So I'm not sure that the people that are in this room are, as a whole, are probably the ones that are going to have those conversations, unfortunately, but as they all become leaders, we all become leaders going forward, thinking much further in advance is going to be really important to be able to hire the next wave of employees. Because you're going to see, you're already seeing it with younger employees, that they like more flexible work environments, they want to work from home. As I mentioned, learning and development plays a huge role in that. My boss, he's a boomer. He's telling me about his 24-year-old son who has been home over Thanksgiving break and takes his water bottle and puts it on his keyboard and goes out to the garage and works out for 45 minutes to make sure that his company thinks that he's working. But the reality is he's in the garage doing a workout, which is, Dad says, he's a great kid. I've never seen him act like this before, but evidently it's normal. Like he acts like all of his peers are doing this. And then Jim, that's his name, he's like, now I'm thinking, like, are all my employees doing this? So these are things that we have to start thinking about. We have to understand how our people are interacting with work, and less scheduled, and most of us are used to working a 8 to 4, 8 to 5 type work environment. Whereas young people are like, I can work like 12, I can take 45 minutes off to go out to the garage and work out, then I can come back and work for a couple of hours. When I get back from dinner, I can work from 8 to 10 and get my work done. And so there's so many cultural things within the organization that you have to start to evaluate that it's really hard for any one theory, in my opinion, to prevail over anything else other than just evaluating your company. I think we're at time now.
Yes. Thank you so much, Chris. Yeah, thanks again, Chris. Great information. Just a couple things, points of order. We're going to try and stay on track. Our outbreak session started at 9:15. We're just a couple of minutes after 9 right now. We want to give you guys a chance for a quick break, buy a break, or whatever you need to do, make a call. If you go out these doors, there's a set of restrooms straight out the door, or if you're ready to go up to the breakout rooms, you can either go up the elevator, which is straight out the door, or circle around to the left. Over here, there's a set of steps. Also another set of restrooms up there. On the information you were given, we divided you guys into groups, and as you came in, we grouped you either 1, 2, or 3. I would ask, would you please go by that group number to report to your rooms? We didn't want to end up with 70 people in one room and 3 in another, so we're trying to balance to make sure we've got good capacity in each one of the rooms. Group 1, if you have 1 on your, you'll be going to room 203 first. Group 2, you'll be going to room 205 first, and then group 3 will be going to room 206. Within the room, we'll have room coordinators. If you have any questions, they can answer the questions for you. And then also we have our presenters. Please stick around. I want you guys to take this opportunity to make connections with the people that I showed you a while ago, the potential pools that you can recruit in the future. And it's so great, and I just use MTSU as an example. You know it's a huge facility over there, but a lot of times you don't know who to approach. You don't know who to connect with. We've got you somebody up here in the room that can fill you in on that type thing. So anyway, thank you for attending this. We'll take our breaks, and then at 9:15 we'll start our breakout sessions. Thanks.